So many cars, yet so few plugs. Welcome to the Urban EV Podcast, where we speak to industry leaders and EV owners with boots on the ground to read the tea leaves on the direction of the green energy revolution. I'm your host, Rob Hoffman.
And I'm Scott Murphy.
I'm joined today by Theo Reichgelt, founder of Nexxt Industry, an e-mobility marketing agency that works across the entire electrified ecosystem, from EV charging networks to e-bikes and energy tech. We're going to dive into the verticals that make up e-mobility, why they need to be treated differently, and what it takes to shift the mindset of a society still hooked on gas. Theo, welcome to the show.
That's a nice summary, Rob. Thanks for the introductions, and great to be here.
All right, Theo, can you just give us a brief intro about who you are and what brought you into the e-mobility fold?
Yeah, of course, happy to. So I'm Theo. I'm the founder and owner of Nexxt Industry, and I started in the e-mobility sector working with Allego about 8 years ago, which is now like one of the top 3 charging networks across Europe. So at the time, I learned a lot about e-mobility and what's needed to grow these networks and to address these options that these networks offer to EV drivers. And obviously that's changed a lot over time now with the new generation of EV drivers, more mature, different needs than people would have years ago. And so we've kind of grown into this industry, starting with the CPOs, like working on marketing for these networks, up to where we are today, working with different startups, with technology providers in the space, with OEMs. So we have a broad scope of companies that we work with, but all focused on e-mobility.
All right. So, on that note, a lot of people just perceive e-mobility as just EVs, but it's a lot bigger than that. Can you kind of dive a little deeper and give us a quick definition of what it all means?
Of course, it's basically any type of vehicle, I would say, that's being electrified would be part of e-mobility. And it's not just that vehicle. Like you say, Rob, a lot of people understand e-mobility like being an electric car, but it's so much more than that. Boats are electrifying, like everything, trucks, like there's a big truck charging network being built all across Europe at the moment. Like different kinds of vehicles that are now electric. And to me, that's kind of the space that we are in. As a vehicle, it's also like different companies in between, data service providers. There are all kinds of apps in this space. Like sometimes you run into very technical products and companies that I've never heard of. And these are also part of making this electrification happening. So that to me is the e-mobility space.
Okay, so from a marketer's perspective, what's your strategy for handling this hodgepodge of this sector?
So what I see a lot, and that's also why we are focusing completely on this industry, is that a lot of companies are founded by technical people, like they're either consultants or software developers, or they have no idea how to sell their product or how to explain what it is that they do. And that's where we come in with marketing. So with most of our clients, we would always start with focusing on a proposition, researching target groups, like what's the real need that they have and how do you solve that with your product or service. And once you know, and you've looked into these details, you can build a story that's going to sell the product. So that's what I always like to tell our clients. Like, we give you a story to tell. That's the first thing you need. Otherwise, nobody will know what you're doing. And that's kind of the problem that we're solving, because a lot of these technically driven people, they have no idea how to explain this to others, what it is that they do. So that's where we come in. And that's also why we, like I said, we completely focus on e-mobility now, because it's not a very easy to understand industry. The audiences that are hard to understand, like you have to know what people are actually looking for. And also with the products and anyone in between, it's a very complex ecosystem that we're trying to simplify by explaining in a very easy way what it is that these companies do. And that's where it all starts. And then you can turn it into like a marketing strategy. You can set up the processes and everything you need, and you can go into execution. And there's a lot to tell about that. But in the essence, like the audiences are different. The maturity of the audiences changes all the time. We're a very young industry at the moment. So like the industry is growing, the audiences are changing rapidly, and also the maturity of everybody, both the industry and the audiences is growing. So that also makes it hard to understand this space. So we've been in here for 8 years already, and we've seen like all the changes happening, and we know who is who and what's going on and how to address products and how to to make that clear to audiences what it is that these companies do. But if you're not being part of this maturity, then it's really hard to do this, because that's also what we see with some of our clients. They worked with other marketing agencies before that were not from the e-mobility sector, and they had a really hard time because they don't understand what's going on. They don't understand how to market it. So results are very mediocre, and it's just not bringing these companies forward. And with the experience that we have, we can really make things happen and make a big difference.
It's interesting because I know that you work with a lot of CPOs, charge point operators. And what I can tell you from my personal experience and from this show as well, that I believe that your hands are probably full right now. You probably got a lot to deal with right now because education is a big part of it. User experience, negative user experience, standards that don't speak to each other very well.
Absolutely.
Just the experience of charging. You're bigger, I know, than just EVs and CPOs. But talk to me about the challenges of a typical EV user that is pulling up to a CPO. It's not compatible with their car or the app or their credit card reader. There's a lot going on there, right? So there's still a lot of maturity that still needs to happen. So how are you tackling all of that?
Yeah, it's actually my favorite topic. Like working with these CPOs shows that there's a lot of issues there very commonly. Like data quality, for example, is one. If you don't put in a charger with the right coordinates and the right information in the charge port management system, it's also going to show up on Google with the wrong information. So that's where it starts a lot of times. Like there are CPOs that have lack of utilization at many of their locations because of these kind of issues. The chargers are simply not being found. So that's where it starts. So make sure that your data quality is correct, that your chargers can be found on Google Maps, on Apple Maps, and all these EV driver apps in vehicles, in the navigation systems of the vehicle. That's the foundation, I would say. And you can see that that's not easy. There are many parties involved to make that happen. We work with a client, for example, that's a data service provider that's in between. So they take the data from a charge port management system, they enrich it with information, and they provide it to Apple and Google and apps providers and some of these OEMs. So by doing it that way, you make sure that your chargers are being found by the right audience. So if somebody needs to charge, then they will find your charging location. That's where it all starts. And as you say, when somebody arrives at a charger, you want to make sure that it's easy to to start a session. It's easy to pay for the charging session. The chargers can be easily found at the location. That sometimes is also an issue. Like sometimes they're huge locations. So where do I find these chargers? If there's no signage, then good luck, So that's also an important thing. Make sure it looks good. People have a good experience. Amenities are becoming more and more important. You don't want to be charging at a location in the dark where there are no amenities. Like people like to grab a cup of coffee, have a roof over their heads when they connect the cable to the car, those kind of things, which is also part of building a proper location. And in terms of marketing, there are many things to do to make sure that people either find your location, and when they arrive, they also build like a preference for your location. And you can think about loyalty programs, and it usually also starts with just having a good experience, like making sure that you deliver the power that people expect, that everything works correctly, there are no issues while charging. Like all those things are still an issue sometimes, and it's gotten better a lot over the years, especially in Europe. You can see that there's a lot of improvements being made, but still, like it's a technical product, so things can happen. Yeah, CPOs are not always aware of that. That's another topic, but yeah, we can talk about this for hours, Rob. But yeah.
Okay, I think it's a good time to say, a little bit of full disclosure. Theo and I work together on my project that I'm working on, which is Clover, obviously. So I think, look, Clover is very different probably from a lot of Theo's other clients in that we're an e-mobility subscription service. So we're not a charge point operator. We're not a vehicle manufacturer. We're kind of a subscription layer on top of other people's technology. And then in addition to that, we offer something that's fairly new in the European market, which is battery swapping. So these were complex subjects that we had to be able to present in a simple way and a compelling way to our customers. And I think, Theo and I went back and forth kind of when we first met. I come from an advertising background. I think Theo will back me up in saying I was initially hesitant to engage with an agency as, coming from an agency background. As you say, I think the e-mobility space is so complicated that a lot of traditional agencies might not understand how to approach it. So once Theo and I spoke a few times, it became evident that it was actually it would be extremely beneficial for us to engage with somebody like Nexxt Industry. And it's been great so far. I don't know, Theo, I would say, when you first heard about us, what was the first thing that came to your mind, and kind of how did you think about initially approaching working with Clover?
Yeah, so first of all, Scott, thanks for the nice words. I really appreciate that, because it's nice to hear from our clients that they appreciate the way that we work, because we're not the traditional agency, but it is because we know what's happening in the e-mobility industry. And sometimes it's for a CPO, which is a completely different business, but sometimes it's for companies like Clover. We work for OEMs as well. We have a company from New Zealand who is entering the European market that we help, like figuring out which is the best market in Europe to start, where is the biggest need for your product, and then make sure that we adjust the proposition based on those markets and help them launch in the European countries. So we do a lot of different things in this space, and it's not just CPOs, let me put it that way. And what I really like with Clover is the idea. I think in the beginning it was more focused on offering e-bikes with battery swapping, and now it's turning into something much more, much bigger, which I really like to see that happen. And this is also the journey we're on together with startups like Clover. Like, we're doing this together. Scott, we had a discussion about pitch decks, for example. Like, these decks, they change over time because you meet with potential investors, they give you feedback on your story, and that needs to be adopted in your brand story, in your pitch deck, because that's the only way to move forward properly. So it's not just, building a brand story, it's also adopting whatever is happening over time and making sure that it stays aligned with the potential of the business and the objectives that you both have.
So, Theo, there are certain strategies I believe all marketing agencies utilize, one variation of another. But once again, the e-mobility space is pretty unique. So whether it's Clover or anyone else, whether they're doing stuff in-house or working with another agency before you arrived, what are some of the most common marketing mistakes that you've seen companies make when entering the space?
Yeah, so what we see a lot is that also in marketing, it's very technical. So companies are explaining things in a very technical way. It's all about the product and the technical solution that they offer, and not about the benefits for the end user. That's often forgotten. That's like a mistake we see quite often. And, we're in a very technical industry, like a lot of technologies that are being developed, and it's all really cool. But if you don't understand how to explain to others what it is that you do and how this benefits them, you're never going to sell it. So I would say that's the biggest mistake we run into, and making things easy, like easy to understand. For example, with charge point operators, it's interesting to see, like, just Google on a few networks. They all talk about 300 or 400 kilowatt chargers or megawatt charging, plug and charge, all of that. But if you're driving an electric vehicle, you just want to charge. You want to know how fast it charges. So am I going to be there for 10 minutes, 20 minutes? And what can I do when I'm there? That's what you should be talking about, and not about that 300 or 400 kilowatt charger. And that's a common mistake that you still see every day. They're all talking about the technology and not how this benefits the end user. And that's what it should be about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I often refer back to Matt Teskey and ChargeWay. It's a route planning navigation app for EVs. And he has developed a color-coded system for the speed of the charger based on the car that you have. He's just trying to really make it, to dumbify it down and make it very simple with a number and a color, and that's it. There's definitely challenges. I know there's a lot of technical issues that make this a lot more complicated than you would think it would be.
Yep. That's what it is, what you need to explain. Like, for example, with our Lego, now you're mentioning this topic, we quite a lot of questions through social media, people asking about, hey, I'm at a 300 kilowatt charger, but my car only charges up to 140 kilowatts. Like, what's going on? There's a problem with
Yeah,
the
it's
charger.
broken.
You need to educate them. And that's what's often forgotten. And yeah, that's where we try to help. And this is an example from a CPO, but with a lot of companies, like if you're building a technical product, it's not easy to simplify your message so everybody understands what it is that you do. But it is something you need to do. Otherwise, nobody will get it and you will never sell your product. And that's where it all begins.
So, listen, I imagine this is the big challenge here, right? It's like you're trying to sell a product to a carbon trained public that is, and there's a cognitive dissonance that's going on right now. Electric feels foreign, even when it's faster, quieter, or cheaper. So how are there any other strategies that you're using right now to sort of force feed the public into understanding that electric is better than carbon?
Also talk about the experience. For example, with electric cars, it's quiet, like it's very silent inside. It's very fun because there's a lot of new technology in those vehicles that makes your journey more fun as well. Like talk about these things, and a lot of people are afraid of charging and range anxiety. It's getting better, luckily now, but you need to explain that it's, there's a charger every, I don't know, 100 kilometers or even shorter. Like it's going to be 60 in Europe very soon. You don't have to worry about that. You can charge anywhere. Your vehicle will tell you where to charge and when and all of that. So it's a different journey compared to like if you're using like a gas powered car, but it's a more fun journey, and that's what you should be talking about. So that's one of the strategies, like showing how fun it is, how easy it is, like why you would want to drive an electric vehicle instead of one with a combustion engine. But like you said, it's a different journey. Like yeah, you fuel up your car once a week or whenever the bar is almost at zero, and then you can continue for another week. And when you drive an electric vehicle, it's different. It's a different journey. You have to think about it. But the vehicles themselves, they make it really easy for you. So it's also fun. Like it's not a problem. And that's something you need to explain like over and over and over again. Education is a big part of what we need to do in marketing in the mobility industry. That's one thing for sure.
Well, is the message resonating right now? Obviously, there's a lot of pushback, especially here in the United States, right? It's become very political. We
Yeah,
could talk about Elon Musk and Tesla also for another 5 hours, probably. It's become
exactly.
extremely charged subject. Are you having, I mean, you work primarily in Europe, correct? You don't have American clients?
Not yet. We're also focusing on the American region because I think it's interesting. Like we've had some questions from companies in the US about how things are done in Europe, because we can see that they're looking at what's happening in Europe, and we can take the learnings from Europe to the US and make things better, like do it better from the beginning. So that's something that I think is interesting for companies that are starting out in this space in the US. And we have some nice connections in the US and Canada as well. And I think there's a future for us there as well. But our main focus at the moment is definitely Europe. And also in Europe, you see so many differences in maturity of the different markets. Like the Nordic countries, they're very advanced
Yeah,
in
you've got
mobility.
you've got Norway, right? Yeah, that's just
Exactly.
like fully
Norway is a
embraced.
great example. Yeah. But also like now Western Europe, the Netherlands, Germany is pretty far ahead. France is really picking up. Like a few years ago, that it was like a desert. There was no charging station you could find. And now you can charge everywhere. So they did a great job there. UK is stepping up. Like these markets are really growing. But the south of Europe is also just getting started. Like, well, Scott, maybe you recognize this. In Spain, it's really just getting started. In Italy, they're the first like fast charging hubs now, but a lot of work to be done. And then in the Eastern European region, I really like that because they're really at the beginning. So we can help them with the learnings that we have to do it better and to make it more efficient. And also in marketing to educate people faster, like make sure that they adopt EVs quicker than what has been happening in the other parts of Europe. So we can see that even in Europe, it's one continent, but there's so many differences in all these markets and countries. And that's one of the nice things, that we have people in different countries. So our team is spread all over Europe. We all work remotely. And by having people in various countries, we also understand the different maturities better. We understand like culture much better, which is also part of marketing. So if you would run a marketing campaign in France, for example, you need to do it in French, otherwise nobody will respond to it. Like that's the way it is. While in the Netherlands or in the Nordics, you could get away with English if you're B2B, like that's all fine. So all these kind of differences make it really fun for us, but you have to understand that. And we had, for example, with the New Zealand client, like they have a marketing team in New Zealand working on Australia, New Zealand. They cannot run their campaigns in Europe because it's a completely different market. You have to understand these audiences and the cultures and all of that. And yeah, that's also where we can help companies in this space do a better job and make sure that they start thriving and selling their solutions.
One thing that's interesting to me about, we talk about the differences between the US and Europe. I think there are still some fundamental commonalities when you're talking about EVs, particularly when you're talking about EVs in densely populated cities like Valencia or Chicago, or in less urban areas, more rural spaces where the charging at home might be the preference. So I think there's a lot of commonalities, whether it's US, Europe, or cities versus, more, less densely populated areas. I think there's caveats in those more so even than in the culture, right? Because again, it changes the entire charging experience. This is called the Urban EV podcast because Rob lives in the middle of Brooklyn
Okay.
and has a
Yeah.
very different charging experience than somebody who might live, in the south of France, on a home
Yeah.
where they
You
have
have different
access to,
needs.
to charging.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, talk to us a little bit about that. I think, in the looking at those two target audiences, urban versus, kind of maybe more rural.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. So we've had many of these discussions with CPOs, like also in terms of strategy, what are you focusing on? For example, Allego was really big in AC charging in cities in the Netherlands. Like they had big networks in all kinds of cities and were very successful there. We had many discussions like, is this the future of charging? Because now you can see that most CPOs believe in fast charging. So you're en route, like you need to charge at some point and then you continue your journey. While also even like maybe that's a nice example, a small country like the Netherlands, there's so many different use cases. If you have a driveway near your house and you can charge your car at home, that's probably the preferred way of doing it. So it's charged every morning, you can go wherever you want, and you probably don't need any fast chargers. But if you don't have that, it becomes more complicated. You can find a public charger somewhere. It's more expensive. There might be other people parked there. It's much more busy these days. Like a lot of people drive EV, so you might end up not being able to charge overnight. So you need to visit a fast charger the next morning. Like all these kind of situations are really important to think about. And what we see happening now in Europe is that almost every CPO is focusing on fast charging, and not just along the highways, but especially near shopping malls, restaurants, hotels. Like those are really interesting locations. Like if you have a hotel, for example, you have all different kinds of guests. So somebody will come and stay overnight, then they will use an AC charger. That's enough for them. They connect in the evening and they unplug it in the morning and they can continue their journey. But you'll also have people that are visiting events at your location. So they might need like a 50 kilowatt or a 150 kilowatt fast charger. So they can just charge for a few hours and then, get back on their way. While you also have people that visit rapidly. If you're close to like a highway location, for example, people will come to your hotel to charge. They just want to charge like 10, 20 minutes and then continue their journey. But it's a great opportunity. So you can sell a cup of coffee, you can make it an inviting place. It's really like a billboard for your location to attract people that need to charge. So that's another entirely different use case. And there's so many opportunities there that you have to keep in mind. And yeah, like I said, we see in Europe that most CPOs are convinced that fast charging is really going to be the future. And it's like replacing the traditional gas stations with chargers. And that's
And they are, right? There are some
happening.
European I've seen on social media, particularly up in the north, in Scandinavia, where they're starting to rip up, gas pumps and replace them. And the convenience is typically already built into the gas station anyway. So you have
Exactly.
a place to go and shop and get your cup of coffee, go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So we are actually starting to see that happen, correct?
Yeah, you can see that most of the companies that are running these gas stations, they kind of change their narrative to being like an energy hub. And now we still need some gas stations. People need to fuel up, but we also need EV chargers there because that's also a form of energy that is needed. And I think those chargers will be taking over in the coming years. You can also see it in the US happening. That I think it was Iona that they are also creating these locations where they swap fuel.
Well, they weren't converting gas stations. Iona is building everything from scratch. They're calling them rechargeries. So it is definitely a ground up EV hub to begin with.
Well, I
Maybe
did
they
see
need
that
some
they
help
have.
from Next with that name because
Yeah,
that
that would
sounds
be
that
Maybe.
bad. Rechargeries. It sounds like going to like a baby nursery or something.
It's a weird name. I wasn't crazy about that name either.
yeah,
Yeah.
true. But it does distinguish themselves from the others. So that's the good thing about
Fair
it.
enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're doing a great job besides the wording that they're using. But in the end, it's kind of a fresh approach to EV charging. And they understand well that you need amenities, that I think they really looked well. I don't know the people at the company, but it looks like they looked well at the needs of EV drivers. And that's what they're building. And that's exactly what you need to be doing. And you can see the same in Europe. Like a company like Fastnet is doing really well with their charging locations, and they're more stepping up now. You have Electra originally from France, like they're growing super fast all across Europe, doing a great job with the charging locations, also looking at the actual needs of EV drivers depending on where the location is situated. But yeah, the market is developing pretty quick, and you need to be there and make sure that you build something that that's going to be used for the next decade, I would say. So that's also risky, by the way. Like we've seen that, maybe that's a nice example with Allego in the past. Like they build a network with 50 kilowatt chargers, but by now it's obsolete.
Ooh,
Like it's not
yeah,
enough
that's a
anymore.
bad speed.
Yeah.
That's neither here nor there. Yeah.
Replacing all those chargers with 150 kilowatt chargers now, and that's what happens. So you need to think about this and to build something that's going to be relevant for the next 10, 20 years, because otherwise you'll be heavily investing again in a few years to update the chargers to the needs of that moment.
Well, do you actually help your clients with strategy along with the marketing? Is that all part and parcel? Because, like you just mentioned there, they invested early in a technology that was a dead end technology. There's 50 kilowatts. I
Yeah.
can tell you, I avoid them like the plague.
Yeah.
They're not slow. They're not fast.
Yeah.
They're just not a great option.
No.
Is that part of what you do as well with your
Yes.
clients?
Yeah, so we do a lot of research for our clients as well. Like we also did some on-site surveys for a CPO in Europe, where we questioned 200 EV drivers in 5 different countries, both at a location from that CPO and competitor locations. And we ask about like, why did you come here to charge? Like, what can be done to make it more attractive to you? Like, what's important to you when charging? And that really helped them to update their strategy, to really think about, okay, so these are the needs of EV drivers, both at our locations and at competitor locations. So they learned so much by doing this. And this is also something that I think more CPOs should be doing, because they act a lot of times on the knowledge that they have themselves and within their teams and the more generic market research that's being done, but they don't act on like actual insights from EV drivers. And if you ask one or two, that's not going to give you the insights that you need. But if you ask 200, then then you have a clear understanding of the needs of those drivers. So that's one of the services that we actually build based on that project. Like any CPO can come to us now and give us like whatever you want to know, and we will, deploy the teams and ask the questions and give you a report and our advice on what we've learned. And that's the input for strategic decisions. So that's where we help. It's not very common with CPOs that we would also be part of the discussion about the strategy. That's usually something they do internally. But with smaller companies, like some startups that we're working with, it's always great to be part of those discussions, because we have a lot of insights. And when talking about strategy, and especially if you want to build something that's going to be relevant in the next decade, then it's good to bring in these insights and to make that part of the discussion. So we'd love to, but we're not always involved. That's the honest answer here.
It's easier said than done, right? You can basically lead the horse to water. You can't make them drink it. And a lot of times this requires a lot of capital as well. So I'm sure sometimes they're balking for that reason alone, even though, well, this does make sense, but it's a gamble, right? Because spend so much on this and hopefully it works.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
Bird's eye view right now, when you take a look at the industry, whether it's CPOs or manufacturer, anyone in the e-mobility space, who's doing it right? Who is combining strategy, marketing, product, the whole kit and caboodle, and it's working? Who's your favorite right now?
My favorite would be Fastnet. It's a CPO, like originally a Dutch company. They're growing really fast all across Europe now. And from the beginning, they had the user in mind. Like every station they've built, it was always with the user in mind. And you could see, even in the beginning in the Netherlands, in their early days, they were pretty popular because everybody understood what it was about. They built these funny roofs, like you can recognize them from a distance. And that's been done really well. And still up to today, like everything they do is with the user in mind, and they're very creative in their marketing. And yeah, it's really cool what they're doing. I think they're one of the examples in the space that are doing really well. I think it's a good example of a company that's doing a great job there.
And I feel like Iona is probably copying their model
Iona,
because, they really have a very unique branded look. It's a little kitsch, but it stands out. You
That's
can't
what
miss
it
it.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, Rob, the ones that build more than just putting a charger in the ground, because there's still CPOs that are just installing chargers, nothing else. Like, I think they're going to lose in the end, because you need amenities. It's more than that. You need to build an experience. And companies like Fastnet, Iona, they understand this really well. Like Electra that I mentioned earlier, these guys understand what's needed and what EV drivers need and the different use cases. And they build a product that's aligned with that. And yeah, that's what you need to do. These are great examples.
So Theo, we're coming up on time, but I am aware that you are hosting a CPO Masterclass coming up in a few weeks. Why don't you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, exactly, Rob. So it's really nice, actually. We're organizing this with Ampeco, which is a charge port management system, a SaaS provider in the region. And we both agreed, like, hey, they work with 160 CPOs that are their clients that using their technology. And they also found that marketing, in a lot of times, is very underrated and they're not doing the best job that they could. So we decided that it would be good to organize a masterclass. And this is never done before. So what we will do is we talk about the strategies that work for CPOs, whether it's about increasing utilization or building your brand, like all of those topics, both B2B and B2C topics will be discussed. There'll be like a marketing 101 presentation from my end, and then we'll have a panel with people from the industry. So we have a representative from Fastnet, we have somebody from Electra, we have the former marketing or CMO from Ionity that's there. The guy built the brand and everything for many years. So we have some very experienced people from the industry that we're going to talk about marketing, how they do things, and what are the best practices that people can learn from. This is a first event, and if this one is successful, we'll probably have more of these kind of masterclasses and workshops in the future. So any CPO that's, if you're working in marketing at a CPO and you're listening, then I would strongly recommend to join the masterclass and to learn a thing or two, because I'm sure that it will be useful for you.
And we'll be sure to put a link in the show notes below. How else can the listeners find you online?
So you can find us at nextindustry.com. It's next with double X. Keep that in mind. And you'll find a lot of information on our website, not just about the marketing services that we deliver, but we have a blog with a lot of articles about the industry, that also some things about marketing, how to do it, like with best practices. But we also have series where we interview like leaders from the industry. So it's really interesting to learn a bit about their background and what they're doing. We have ebooks on our website. We also have our own podcast, the E-Mobility Marketing Podcast. We're actually kicking this off. So we had one episode so far. So we've been quite busy, and yeah, it's a little bit, I really like to pick that up now. Anyway,
Hopefully this is inspiring you right now, Theo. Get moving on that.
we had some fun. So we should start doing that again. So there's a lot of information there. So go there and you can see what it's all about. And obviously I'm on LinkedIn, always happy to connect with people from the industry. And if I can help you with some things, please reach out, and happy to discuss and to meet.
Wonderful. Well, listen, thanks once again to Theo Reichgelt for helping us unpack the beautifully messy world of e-mobility and reminding us that changing transportation means changing the way we talk about it as well. To learn more about Theo and Nexxt Industry, check out nextindustry.com. And once again, that'll be added to the show notes below. As always, a reminder to follow us here or on your favorite social media or streaming platform. Like, subscribe, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Your review or feedback is always appreciated. We will see you all next week with a new episode of the Urban EV Podcast.